Hello, welcome to the Soil Quality Restoration Tag. We hope that today you can learn how to have a nice yard, but also save money and help our water resources and other environmental issues. The first thing that I want us to think about is why are we so obsessed with lawns? What happened? And I recommend you to look at this article in Scientific and American, the American obsession with lawns. I found it pretty interesting. But basically, it comes from early European settlement. When Europeans came, they brought different livestock with them, but we didn't have many native lawn species or grass species that they were able to live on. So early on, a lot of cattle started dying, and they decided to import grass species from Europe. One of them was Kentucky bluegrass, and little by little, it started being cropped for homes, for gardens, just as a landscape feature, just like what we know today. Even later on, when President George Washington decided to have one of these grasses, and it made it pretty famous, so people wanted to show that they also were powerful, that they also had enough economic resources, and they started their own yards in their homes. And that kept evolving until what we have today. If you see the next picture, this is a picture of one development in Cedar Falls, but yards are a really important part of what we have in our developments. Also, there are still status show or an idea, they still show like our status, and they still are important culturally for us. It's not unusual to have a neighbor that gets mad if her or his neighbor has dandelions or their yard is not green, etc. So it's part of our social status. Ideally, we could revert that, as yards are the main crop that we have, and it doesn't feed us, it doesn't produce anything, and it takes a lot of time, money, and resources. And the next slide, you can see that to keep our lawns, we really need a lot of resources. The main one that we can think about is fertilizers. And fertilizers might make your yard look greener and beautiful, but they also cost a lot of money, but mostly create a lot of environmental issues in our waterways. There's a lot of algae blooms in our own lakes, but we can also go as far as the Gulf of Mexico, and we're creating the dead zone with so much fertilizer from agricultural production, but also from urban production. And our urban production again would be yards. If you click again, we have also many times have to put pesticides to kill critters in our yards, like snails, and these pesticides get washed out many times when it rains, or get infiltrated in our groundwater, and they cause a lot of health issues for humans, but also for other organisms. If you click again, you will have herbicides with killers. You don't want those dandelions for sure. Because culturally we don't want them, so we get these, and weed killers are also going to be washed out in our lakes, in waters and groundwater, but also are really important for the disappearance of pollinators. The next thing that we need for yards maintenance is watering them. When it gets dry, we need to water them, and again, this is depleting our water resources. A lot of our water locally comes from groundwater, and the groundwater takes thousands of years to get their form, but it's taking tens of years for us to deplete it. So watering is another input that we need. And last, we need time and gasoline or petroleum to mow our lawns. We of course know that petroleum or fossil fuels are the main responsible of greenhouse gases, and then greenhouse gases alter our climate, giving us more drought or more rainfalls that are really strong, that are not going to help us either in our water resources. So why do we need to sow all of this? Well, the main thing is because of our soil resources are not good. If you can see on the left are a profile of soil resources on a typical prairie area that it hasn't been farmed. But when we go from prairie to farm, we lose a lot of soil. And when we lose soil, we lose that healthy area or healthy substrate for the grass or for any plant to grow. And when we go from cropland to development, we lose more soil. And as inspectors, we can tell you that many times we just find 2, 3, 4 inches of topsoil, which is not enough to support good vegetation. In the next picture, you can picture below, you can see what not so great soil looks like compared to wonderful topsoil on the right.
One way to improve soil health is through soil quality restoration. Most of this presentation comes from this brochure, which can be found at iowastormwater.org. It is a very good resource if you're looking to improve soil health at your home and businesses, and even provides specific directions on how to implement soil quality restoration. This is important because it improves soil health and allows the vegetation to prosper without so many additives like fertilizers or water. Even if a lawn is green with the use of many fertilizers and watering, the soil quality may be poor and those homeowners are having to do more maintenance and upkeep to keep their lawn looking good, compared to a truly healthy lawn through soil quality restoration. Here are the basic steps included in the brochure for soil quality restoration. First, it is important to contact Iowa One Call to make sure you do not damage any existing utilities like cable, water, gas, etc. Second, you will want to locate any irrigation or invisible fences to make sure to avoid those areas. Next, you will mow the yard to 2-inch height. Then you will need to aerate the lawn. Depending on the area you are restoring, you will likely need to rent equipment or call a landscaper. Feel free to reach out to us if you have difficulty finding a landscaper, and we can try to help you find someone. When aerating, a deep tine aerator works best and is recommended down to 6 to 8 inches. You will then apply a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch compost. There is compost available for free at Waterloo or Cedar Falls, but make sure it is good quality and doesn't have sticks, rocks, or debris in it. Other options for compost include local hardware stores for smaller amounts. Lynn County has certified compost as an option if you're looking for larger amounts, but you may need to work with others for a larger quantity and for transportation. Finally, you will apply the seed grass and water until it has established. This slide just shows the previous steps discussed with photos to make it more digestible. The top left is a photo of a yard with poor soil quality, which is likely highly compacted. The upper right is a photo showing the equipment aerating the lawn. The bottom left is placing the compost over the aerated soils. It will likely look dark for a bit until the grass grows, which might spark some questions from your neighbors, in which you can just tell them you're adding nutrients to the soil to improve soil health. And then the last picture is that grass a year later and in a much healthier state. Quality compost is really important. It should be loose, it should be granular and fall apart, it should be dark colored and moist. It is also important to make sure there is no debris, rocks, sticks, or trash in the compost in order for it to grow the new grass seed properly. The application can be done by hand, with a spreader, or by a landscaper. It just depends on the area you are restoring and how much work you want to put into it on your own. In order to determine how much compost is needed, the same brochure we referenced earlier has an equation and an example to use for reference. One note we wanted to make is that since the compost will likely be delivered to your home, you want to make sure the compost is protected and not left for too long with rain in the forecast, because that soil can run off. This would be a waste for you, and it would also cause an illicit discharge per city ordinances. Soil quality restoration could be expensive depending on how much you are restoring and where you get your compost from. So here's one cost share option for those that live within the Dry Run Creek watershed. This grant can cover up to 75% of the cost in reimbursement. Josh Bulk with the Iowa DNR would be a good contact if interested in this grant. Another cost share option may be through the Resource Enhancement and Protection, or REAP program. The Blackhawk Soil and Water Conservation District receives an annual allocation of funds to disperse throughout the county. If selected, you could be eligible up to 50% reimbursement of total cost, up to a maximum of $2,000 per project per year. However, these funds are first come, first serve and can go quickly. In addition to improving soil health, you may want to also consider reducing the amount of yard you have to maintain for areas that may be mostly unused. This can be done by including more plants or landscaping. If you do need a larger yard, another change of paradigm I want people to consider is adding native turf instead of Kentucky bluegrass. The main seed mixes to use for native turf are blue grama, buffalo grass, and side oats grama. The main difference between these native turf grasses and your typical turf grass is they get green a little later in spring and dormant earlier in fall. It may not be as green as long as imported turf, but it is a better option because it will withstand drought and wet periods and not require as much fertilizer or watering. The other paradigm to consider is a diverse lawn. Typically, our instinct is to see clover or dandelions and pull them because we think they are ugly, but this is cultural. Many times, these earlier flowering plants are there to help our earlier pollinators survive. A bee lawn is an example of a more diverse lawn. If you go to this website, it will take you to a brochure and information on how to establish a diverse lawn. It is important to educate yourself and know that they have an important purpose before all of the other flowers get established in order to feed our pollinators. This slide is to help out people that are buying new homes. We want you to be aware that you have the right to good topsoil and depth. Both Waterloo and Cedar Falls have requirements on how much topsoil is required after construction. Therefore, we urge you to take a look at the topsoil that was placed on your yard to ensure you have sufficient topsoil to allow for better lawn establishment. Overall, improving soil health is beneficial in so many ways, whether it is for the health of our kids, to have more functional gardens, for the health of our pollinators that are also important for agricultural production, and how our pets are better off without fertilizers on our lawns. But what is most important is that soil quality restoration allows us more time to enjoy our yards. Thank you very much for your time today. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us at Cedar Falls or Waterloo.